Hello, good evening, everybody. I have tangled all my wires up immediately. That's okay, though. I hope everyone has had a good day or a good evening and are just ready to chill. Um, so I do have to preemptively start all of this off with an apology. Um, I realized this past week that I spent the entirety of the last stream calling the main character Tristan, as in Tristan and Isolde, and not Tristran with two R's. So, and going back and checking my slides, I misspelled his name on the slides too. So, like, my brain auto-corrected in, like, the worst way possible. I just totally changed the character's name. I am very sorry about that. I promise I didn't mean to call the poor guy by the wrong name. But yeah. So apparently that happened. Um, hopefully that won't happen tonight. I am very familiar with tonight's roster of characters. Although some of them, it is strange that they have names. Uh, and I have coffee tonight, so we will see if the coffee helps me stay awake. I will point out to anyone who is joining. This one in particular is going to be spoilery. I am going to talk a lot about both the book and the movie. Mostly the book, but the movie's going to come into it at some point. So if you haven't read Howl's Moving Castle and you want to read it and not have it spoiled, go read the book. It's really good. Lots of love. But yeah, normally I try to stay low to mid on the spoilers. This one I just have thrown the whole thing out and been like, this one's gonna have spoilers. Alright, so let's get into this. So as per usual, I do not own the rights to the book. This is just meant to entertain and inform you, and I hope you enjoy. And let us see if we can get this to work the first time tonight. Yes, we can. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I had options for tonight. It was originally published in 1986 with Green Willow Books. It is a part of the series. It is the first of three. That is not the name of the series. As far as I know, the series is known as the Moving Castle books, which is fine. But yeah, it's part of a series. They've recently been republished, so if you want them all with the same cover set, you should be able to find those. They got republished in 2023. You can find like really nice folio editions. You can find all sorts of editions. I only have two pictures. I'll give you this warning now. I only have two cover pictures of this because finding the illustrators' names is very hard. The original cover, and the reason I am able to give you this original cover is because I can, in fact, read the illustrator's name, was done by Joss A. Smith, who's an American illustrator who has illustrated numerous children's books and served as professor of fine arts at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. He has this very fantasy, almost surreal-y style, similar to this. So pictured here, we've got Calcifer, who, for the record, looks... I'll talk to it more when I get to talking about, like, the book versus the movie, but, like, this is what, like, the description of Calcifer is. is that he's like blue fire with green hair and the purple mouth and the orange eyes. And it's just kind of a terrifying image. So, like, my brain just superimposes movie Calcifer all the time. They're like, oh, but he's blue. I'm like, that's fine. Calcifer was blue sometimes. And then this is the cover of the one I have. So this is the 2008 EOS cover by John Rocco. He's an American illustrator who he's done numerous covers, but he's won a lot of accolades and awards, specifically for the Percy Jackson series. So the Percy Jackson, the Stories of Gods, the Stories of Heroes, the big books, and then like the Trials of Apollo, and I don't know if he did Cain or not, but he did a lot of them. He worked at Walt Disney Imagineering and helped design some rides. He worked at DreamWorks for a time, so he has done a lot. Also, if you like this cover, they do have the full set of Howl's Moving Castle, House of Many Ways, and Castle in the Air in this style. So it is possible to find the whole collection in this cover style as well. About the author. The author is Diana Wynne Jones. She was a British novelist and poet. She has been cited as inspiration by numerous modern fantasy authors. I could give you a whole long list here, but she was a prolific writer and inspired a lot of people. She won 2 Mythopoeic Awards. Mythopic? And this was just one of those things that I found very interesting. She was listed as inspiration for both Robin McKinley and Neil Gaiman, but also, like, she was friends with both of them. So Robin McKinley, who wrote Spindle's End and Beauty, and Neil Gaiman, who wrote Stardust, and The Graveyard Book. Fun fact, this is one of the things that I wasn't able to say last time, is that in the author's note of Stardust, he actually thanks Diana Wynne Jones. And I was just delighted by that, because I knew I was immediately going to be reading Howl's Moving Castle, and so that was wonderful, and the fact that they knew each other, and I adore both of their works. And then the other thing that I put in here is that Howl's Moving Castle won the Phoenix Award, which is an award for a book that, like, when it was published, I don't remember if it was 10 years, if it had to be 10 years old or 20, but when it was published, it kind of didn't make a splash. It won no award, just sort of, boop, it existed, and then later on became a big deal, so Rising from the Ashes. And part of what made it a big deal is the Miyazaki film based off of the book. Which for a lot of people is probably their entry point into Howl's Moving Castle. And they would be... there is a common, semi-common belief that the book and the movie are the same story, but one is told by Howl and one is told by Sophie. And the movie is told by Sophie and the book is told by Howl, which is why, like, they are the way they are. The differences are what they are. But I'll get into that a little more later. So what do you need to know? This is fairy tale tropes. If you aren't familiar with fairy tale tropes, you can read this book. It's fine. You won't be lost. But knowing the tropes makes it really nice when they're called out, subverted, just like addressed as fact, and you're like, oh, it's one of those books. It has a very interesting magic system. Arrogant man, stubborn woman. This is, I don't know if it's actually a trope, but it feels like one, because I have, like, you see it time and time and time again, just in storytelling and in myths and all. of of you've got an absolute peacock of a man and just a mule of a woman, and you're like, ah, yes, that's how this is gonna happen. And then A Tale of Two Sophies, specifically being book Sophie versus movie Sophie, and how they are vastly different. Um, Although the bones are still the same. That is one thing I will say for the Miyazaki film. As an adaptation, it does really well of holding the spirit of everything together, even if it's a little soft on some of the details. So your main character is Sophie Hatter. She is the oldest of three sisters and laments that she will always be a failure in her own story. And so she takes to talking to herself and her work, first hats and then other things as life goes on. This is kind of the beginning of the tropiness. So she's the oldest of three, and her next youngest sister are full sisters, and then they have a stepsister and a stepmother. And so, like, she makes the comment of, oh, they should have fallen into, like, the ugly stepmother or ugly stepsister trope, but they didn't. She talks about how her younger sisters will be more successful than her. And kind of, this is the beginning of Sophie being her own worst enemy. And I'll get into that later, but this is Sophie. She's so sure of how everything works that she misses the forest for the trees, and I feel her. But she's got a wonderful imagination, and it works in her favor. So the fairy tale tropes that you see. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the ones that like pop up very quickly, very early on in the story. You've got the stepsisters. You've got the oldest of three trope being the oldest is either not going to do anything or just is doomed to fail. The middle child will probably have to work hard but can marry well, maybe do magic, and the youngest is just going to be like the prettiest, the best, is going to marry well, is going to have the handsome prince falling for her, those kind of things. Can't say you're cursed, where you have received a curse or a cursed artifact, and you aren't allowed to say, hey, here's what all my problems are stemming from. Things are not what they seem, both with individual characters and with like the whole stinking premise. This whole book, if you're not familiar with fairy tales, this whole book can rug pull pretty close to the end. If you are familiar with fairy tales, it'll set you on the back foot a little, but it won't like completely floor you. And self-fulfilling prophecy. This isn't a fairy tale trope, but it is something just to keep in mind. Self-fulfilling prophecies are a thing, and sometimes those self-fulfilling prophecies are in fact tropes. So, yeah. So interesting magic. So magic exists. Let's start with that. Magic exists primarily because someone believes it does. If they believe that there is magic and that the magic will work, there will be magic and it will work. But also, someone who is like stubborn and strong-willed and determined enough can speak it into being. This is the problem with Sophie. Specifically in the book, not in the movie. In the book, Sophie starts doing magic from the very beginning, by talking to hats and telling them, you're going to need to marry well, you're going to, catch someone's eye, you're going to be the cutest little thing. Like, she's just talking to things as she works to pass the time because there's no one to talk to. But her stubbornness and belief is enough to make it magic. Like, on the one hand, there's some indication that, oh, well, her family line is magical. But also, like, that isn't brought up till a lot later. And that's really not how her magic is addressed. Because it's not like Howl can just, like, point at something and be like, be a thing, and it will be a thing. And then, like, the whole how the Witch of the Waste gets her magic, and just the whole general vibe. Oh, excuse me. The whole general vibe of magic is very interesting. And the concept that magic is enough a part of a person that it can, like, confuse a spell if, let's say, pieces of you are in separate places. And it's like, what is the most place? Where is the magic? So, arrogant man, stubborn woman. It is what it says on the end, on the tin. Howl is a massive peacock. He's a peacock in the movie. He's even worse of one in the book. And so, Book Sophie is very much a force of nature. Like, you see it briefly in the movie when she cleans the castle. But Book Sophie is so much more. She's curious, she's nosy. She causes as many problems as she solves in the book. When she goes to Wales, that causes problems. So... Excuse me. See, this is why I have coffee. I'm so sorry. Hang on. So, it's not quite an immovable object or an unstoppable force. But it's a reoccurring trope in books that's just like... It's interesting. It's interesting to see how they interact. In Howl and Sophie's case, it's a good interaction in that they don't tear each other apart. But they're each frustrated with each other, but they aren't so frustrated that they can't work together. And it's actually kind of sweet at the end. Because the arrogance, so Howl's arrogance is his shield. So his good looks, his peacocking, his self-assuredness, all of it is a veneer over a coward. And it is delightful. It's briefly addressed in the movie, but not in anywhere near as good a way. I think in both, Howl is like, oh, I'm a coward. Go do this thing for me. Because I'm a coward. Go tell other people I'm a coward. And in the movie, it feels like he's lying. In the book, you assume he's lying up until you realize, oh no, he's dead serious. He is a coward who is trying to fake it until he makes it. But he is wonderful, and it is a delight. So, A Tale of Two Sophies. So this is where Book Sophie and Movie Sophie are vastly different. Like, Markle is different, Howl is different, but really Sophie is, as your main character for the book, if you don't like Book Sophie, you probably won't enjoy the book. So both Book and Movie Sophie are stubborn and opinionated, but one accepts how she is, that being the movie Sophie, and the other doesn't really want to be that way, and that being Book Sophie. So while while both of them are set to get out of town, like, oh, I got turned into an old woman, I should probably leave. Um, Movie Sophie is fine with being an old woman, and Book Sophie is actively unhappy about it. She wants to fix it. Now, she does gradually lose interest in it because other things are very distracting. You know, magic, Howl, developing like friendship with people. Um, but she doesn't want to remain cursed forever. Um, she wants the curse to be removed. And the other thing is that Book Sophie is a lot nosier than Movie Sophie. So in the novel, Sophie will do things like try to go through the black doorway. She will start just like looking around at stuff. She will do all sorts of like just nosy things. And on the one hand, she's an old lady. On the other hand, you're like, you are not in fact an old lady and should in fact know how to act and behave yourself. And but she doesn't. She jumps into everything with both feet, and if it was an oopsie, she figures that out. Calcifer is mostly the same. He's a little bit less likable in the book. And I think that has a lot to do with just how soft he is in the movie. I mean, his weak point is still Sophie. Like, both book and movie Calcifer would, like, turn the world upside down for Sophie. But, like, in the book, he knows right off the bat, oh, you're cursed, it's nasty, get me out of my contract and I'll get you out of your curse. And they agree to that. That is not just a throwaway thing or something. It is a pretty solid agreement between the two of them, to the point where Calcifer points out at one point, he's like, "Are you going to get me out of this contract?" And she's like, "I'm working on it." She is not, in fact, working on it. Which the book, like, flat out goes out of its way, like, in the narration to basically say she was not, in fact, working on it. But I still like her. It will be a bit jarring if you are only familiar with the film. Sophie is nowhere near as sweet in the book as she is in the movie. To be fair, I don't think movie Sophie could handle book Howl, and vice versa. But, well, and I don't think movie Howl could handle book Sophie. But they're still good, together. The storyline is a bit different. So, there is the vague rumblings of a war. It takes like one sentence in the book. But the black doorway leads to Wales. It leads to, which is where Howl is originally from. It leads to his blood family. It's a little jarring the first time, Because it's like you go from this high fantasy, high fairy tale world, and it's like, now we're in Wales, and oh, your clothes aren't good enough because they are fantasy clothes, and they need to get changed. And like at one point, is it Howl who ends up in the rugby jacket? Somebody ends up in a rugby jacket, and Sophie is very confused about what these words mean. So for recommendations, for books with interesting magic, so many of these you will have seen before, but we will go through them anyway. Sandry's book, which is the first book in the Circle of Magic by Tamora Pierce, has two different kinds of magic in it, although only one of them is focused on. And it is the magic of stuff, which sounds way lamer than it actually is, but things like magic in thread and sewing, magic in smithing and fire, magic in plants and growing things, and just like raw magic in the elements. You get magic that's in cooking in that series. You get magic that are in things like glass or medicine. But that's when I say magic in stuff. It's not read a spell, say a spell, have magic do a thing. It's understand thread, are able to use thread to tie a person up in their own clothes type of magic. The second one is So You Want to Be a Wizard by Diane Duane, which is the first in the Young Wizards series. The magic is science and math based. It is the most sci-fi fantasy I have ever read. I adore it. Even when it goes hard on the sci-fi, which is not my forte. Magic is interesting, and the first book less so than some of the later ones, because they don't really settle into their specializations as much as they do later. But Nita and Kit will both wind up being specialized in different kinds of magic. Things happen in... how do I explain this without spoiling the book? Things happen that are kind of just about what if and hope and opportunity. How to Ditch Your Fairy by Justine Larbalister is it's a teen book. I would go so far as to say it's a teen girl book, but it's about in a world where everybody gets a fairy. Some people have like the good hair fairy, and some people have the loose change fairy, and some people have like the good song fairy, so they always have a good song stuck in their head and not a annoying one. If you got like a lame spare change fairy, how do you get rid of it and get a fairy you want? That is the general premise. The main character does not like her fairy and is trying to make it go away so she can potentially get a better fairy. Trick the cosmos into getting her a better fairy. But there is a lot of teen romance and drama in that one. It's a really cute read. And then Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett is about stopping the apocalypse. It is one of the most irreverent books ever, and it is an absolute delight. Very early in that book, one of the devils, Crowley, everybody's meeting up and talking about the evil stuff they've did, and he's like, I have mildly inconvenienced everyone by making this freeway have problems. And they're like, well, that's not evil. And it's like, no, but it's a mild inconvenience for like hundreds of thousands of people. So instead of like being super evil to one person, it's being mildly irritating to millions of people. And of course, like, he thinks that's great. The other demons are like, no, that's not evil. Meanwhile, me, as someone who does not enjoy driving, is like, no, that is in fact evil. But it's a lot of fun. You deal with both angelic and demonic powers. But that one is a lot of fun. And then Arrogant Man, Stubborn Woman. I told you I could pull a bunch of these. Elena by Tamora Pierce is the first book in the Song of the Lioness Quartet. It is, unsurprisingly, about Elena, who is extremely stubborn. Very, very early in the book decides she's not going to do what she's supposed to do and is going to, in fact, do the exact opposite, and works with her twin to accomplish that. And while you may think that the Arrogant Man is, in fact, her twin, who does show up later in the quartet and is, in fact, a very arrogant man, no, her love interest that shows up in the first book and reoccurs later, is extremely arrogant. And there is more than one battle of wills between the two of them. But it's interesting. Dragonflight by Anne McCaffrey. Also, for the record, I would like to point out, if you are looking up Dragonflight, put novel or book after it, because the WoW expansion has completely ruined the search for Dragonflight, and like, I just wanted to make sure that this was the first book in the series, and I just searched for Dragonflight, and all it pulled up was WoW. So make sure you put either book or novel or Anne McCaffrey somewhere after it, or you will not find it. It will be buried under WoW. But this is the first book in the series. So you have... Hang on. I have to get the right brother. It's Falar, who is your arrogant man. He is a dragon rider, a bronze dragon rider. And you have Lessa, who is your stubborn woman. And she is also very proud. Like, there is a level of pride in her that matches Falar, but this description is very spot on point, to the point that at one point in the book, she makes the comment of, if I go back, he's going to shake me. And they go back, and the first thing he does is, like, grab her by the arms and start shaking her and being like, what were you doing? You were gonna get killed. And she's like, I told you so. But yes, even knowing he was going to shake her, she did what she did. I will say that Dragonflight is not my favorite in the world of Pern. You do meet some characters that I like better than the main characters, but it's a good establishing shot for the world. It's the first book. I'll be honest, Falar and Lessa are not my favorites. Like, of the people you meet in that first book, I can think off the top of my head of two that I like better than them. And it's like, the fact that I can think of two, three technically, because one of them shows up. But yeah, they're very much people, in much the same way that Howl and Sophie feel like actual people, that, like, you've met someone like this. you have met someone with the pride and stubbornness of Lessa, and you have met someone with the like competence but also like raw arrogance that is Falar, and you're like, yeah, you're competent, but who boy, could you dial that down a bit. And it's not a veneer for the record for Falar. There's no veneer there. That is just him to the core. Wolf Tower by Tanith Lee I have talked about before, and this may seem unusual on this list. To be fair, I put Wolf Tower on here because there's several stubborn women in Wolf Tower, but you really don't get it with the main character until later. Claudie gets more stubborn. The man is always arrogant, but Claudie gets better. And even her love interest, who is technically arrogant, is not. Also, yes, this is a reoccurring thing where it is the love interest who is the arrogant man. And finally, Esquire, His Knight and His Lady, by Gerald Morris. So this is Arthurian legend, sort of. I mean, it is Arthurian legend, but it's expanding on that and writing its own story as well. So you have characters that didn't exist in Arthurian legend. And you have specifically the Squire's Lady, who is very stubborn. She is very wonderful, and she knocks him down several pegs, and it's delightful. I will say, out of these, this is probably the softest, because it's very much an arrogance of youth, and the stubborn lady in this case is also just very young, and it is the brashness of youth. It's less of a this is my whole character trait and more of a this is a phase I'm going through. It is the second book in the series, so Squire's Tale is first. I don't remember which book Lancelot shows up in. I don't think this is the one Lancelot shows up in. Also, I'm beginning to think this isn't the book I thought it was. Hang on. Hang on a moment. Let me go check. Alright. I'm back. Sorry about that. I was, as I was talking about the book, I'm like, wait, I think this is the wrong book. It's not. My memory did not fail me, but, I suddenly remembered that the next book in the series is called The Savage Damsel and the Dwarf, and I'm like, wait a minute. Was that the one I was thinking? No. Squire, His Knight and His Lady. But that is that. Sorry about that brief delay. Yeah, I love Howl's Moving Castle. I love both the book and the movie. Why is this not doing what I want it to? There we go. I love both the book and the movie. The book is a bit slower than the movie, but like I love Sophie so much. Sophie gets like furious and makes Weed kill her, and then finds out that the boys have been spying on her and just about like unleashes everything on them. It's wonderful. It's very satisfying. And the other nice thing is that while Sophie does make a lot of her own problems, she doesn't make all of them. And she works to solve her problems. So it's not just, you know, it's not just Sophie being like, well, yeah, I have problems. It's Sophie being like, I have problems. How do I fix this? Let me try to brute force this. And Sophie very rarely has finesse. Movie Sophie has a lot more finesse than book Sophie. Although it is worth mentioning that the Witch of the Waste is more of a villain in the book. That is Howl's Moving Castle. I will say something that I find kind of delightful about this book, especially if you get the one I got, which is the EOS one that has the extras. The extra, for the record, is like an interview with her. Her, the author. And apparently she never thought about the castle having feet. And she never understood why people love Howl. So it's one of those things that just is kind of delightful to think about. She liked the movie and like had statues and figures of the castle, Howl, Sophie, and Calcifer. It's always nice to see when an author actually likes an adaptation of their work. Because it feels like so many of them must not, like, they can't, right? But so this is really nice that she actually likes it. And then, yeah, apparently she would get asked a lot, oh, can I marry Howl? And she never understood why and kept trying to tell people, oh, he's not a good person. And like, the general consensus was, yeah, we know. That's not a problem. It is interesting because, so Book Howl, so there are two more books. There is House of Many Ways and Castle in the Air. And they are connected, like there's a timeline here, but they are so their own stories. The only reason you would need to read Howl's Moving Castle first is to know who your cast of characters is, because they don't really introduce Sophie and crew. They introduce the new guys who show up, but like they assume you know who Sophie and Howl and Calcifer and all are. But yeah, they're completely self-contained little stories. Little novels. They're novels. Oh, I didn't mention that. So, Howl's Moving Castle, has that thing that, like, a lot of older novels have that I really wish people would get back into, and, like, I desperately want it to be a thing again, where, like, the chapters have fun titles here. For example, chapter 6 is called In Which Howl Expresses His Feelings with Green Slime. And I just miss, I miss books that give me chapter titles like that. It's a pretty quick read. You could read it in an afternoon, you could break it into two. It took me around 4 hours. I split it in two. But it is a lot of fun. The sequels are also very good. Although there's no, I understand why they didn't make the whole series into movies, or why someone hasn't tried to since. Because I don't think you can meet and match what Bottled Lightning that Howl's Moving Castle was. But part of me would also really like to just see it. So, with all of that being said, so we have finished off a film February. I think. Have I mathed correctly? Yes, I have. I'm like, it's the 21st. We're not gonna. Okay. So a little talk, preview, explanation. So we have finished off the books that are going to be directly based off of film, or have films based off of them. Let me flip that around. Flip that script. And we are going to go back to like me randomly selecting books in whatever order I feel like. When summer gets around, we're going to be doing sequel summer. So I have not decided yet if that is May, June, July, or if it is going to be May, June, July, August. It will not go any further than August, and the goal is to start it in May. But I will be doing sequels to books that I have read and talked about already. So things like Mything Persons. I could technically read House of Many Ways, the sequel to The Assassin's Apprentice, stuff like that. I've done a bunch of books that have sequels, and I would like to talk about some of the sequels, and not have to be like, well, this is book 2, and I feel really bad about starting with book 2. So that's the goal. Like I said, I haven't quite decided yet if the summer is going to go through August, or if it's going to stop at July, or at the end of July. But I will be doing sequels. I will say I have one book that I'm trying to hold on to until October, but by the time October runs around, it's going to have another book out, and I kind of want to read that. So we will see. We will see what happens to October. But yeah, so that is the goal. I will probably reach back on my bookshelf later and figure out what I'm reading with my very, very technical and exacting search method. I will say I know we're not quite at a year yet, but I have really enjoyed doing this. It has made sure I keep reading books. Because I had kind of been in a slump where I was reading mostly fanfic, which I love and enjoy, and it's a lot of fun, but I also love books. And so this has not only been filling the backlog of my ever-growing to-be-read pile, but it's also letting me go back to some that I love, like Howl's Moving Castle, like The Graveyard Book, and be able to reread those and share them, because as much as I love Howl's Moving Castle, it is not on my list of books that I read all the time. It's not It's not Shatterglass. It's not Terrier. It's not Elena. Um, or even like Triss. Uh, like there are books that I will pick up and read because they are comfort, and Howl's Moving Castle, as much as I love it, isn't one of them. So it is nice to go back and reread the books that I have fond memories of, but haven't like read in a while. It's also surprising for some of them. So like when I did Silverwings, I hadn't reread Silverwings probably 20 years. So rereading that was a lot of fun, and it's different. It's different to go back to a book that you haven't read in a long time. So that is it for tonight. I'm very sorry about last time and mispronouncing the main character's name through the whole of it, but this one, I know I pronounced their names right, and if for some reason Calcifer's name is not Calcifer, I will be going crazy. But I hope all of you have a good night and have a good rest of the week. And I will see you in a couple of weeks.